we have another prophet who is warning Israel of what's happening in they're going to get their act together in essence, and there are three major themes in the book of Amos, and we'll go over some of those with the video. Number one is social justice. Amos repeatedly condemns the wealthy for abusing the marginalized, selling the poor in what they call debt slavery, and twisting the legal system to support them. Now, when we look at the scripture, Jesus focuses a lot about taking care of those who are needy. As a matter of fact, I might have mentioned this last week, but every example I find in the New Testament of people going to heaven or not going to heaven deals with relationships. Come on in. I was hungry, and you fed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was naked, and you clothed me. And they said, Lord, when did we see you like this? And what was his response?
The least of these you did it to me.
When you did it to the least of these, you did it to me. I live in sort of a life of conflict here. I don't see it up here as much as I see it in Florida. In Florida, there are panhandlers on every street corner. And they seem to have their spot. And you're seeing pictures of them leaving and getting in a nice car and driving away. There's one lady that's on one street corner every day, and she's just crying. And one day I saw her and three other guys riding a bike, laughing and carrying on. They were probably going to another spot. And so, am I wrong for ignoring them? I like what Susie has done. We give them that pack to eat, or things like that. I really like that. I saw a guy get a pack the other day, and when the car pulled away, he had opened it up and started eating. It was in Pontiac. I got caught in Pontiac Friday night. They were having the Pontiac Blues 100-year parade. And it took me forever to get out of there. But and so I'm in conflict with those things. When people come to church and ask us for help, my thought is we help them because it's the right thing to do. If they take advantage of us, that's on their head. No, but are we to deal with the Lord's money in a good way? And that's why I'm sort of against giving up cash. The people that want to, I need gas. We had gas cards. We're probably out of them now, aren't we? But you give them a gas card. And if they need groceries, I think, well, let's go up to Polish. And we go through and instead of giving them money, I'll have people asking for money at a gas station. They run out of gas, they're on the way, whatever. And so I don't give them money. I say, pull your car up here, and I'll put gas in the car. So, what is your thought on, great emphasis is put on helping those who are in need. What is your response to that? Bob, I know you're good for a response.
Basically, I think it's very important that we have justice, and that's a common theme throughout the Bible. And justice is not always an easy black and white thing. It is doing the appropriate thing, and rule of law, and it's not always easy to say what justice is, but we always know what justice is not. If somebody's falsely accused of something, if somebody's made to pay a debt they have no obligation toward. So justice and social justice that has a different interpretation in different parts of the world. But in the United States, we believe the laws should apply equally to everyone. You shouldn't give certain people an exemption because they're rich or because they're poor. It should be pretty uniform. And that basically we all benefit when the rules are uniform. And so as to the people on the street, you're right, if you're giving them the money, this is going to cause them to continue to be using drugs or doing whatever else. I likewise say, that's not a good solution. But I have on occasion bought people meals or done other things, and I think that's really what they need, and they're not just using it as a ruse to try to get the money to do something that's going to cause them more harm.
Right.
We are fortunate to live in a country with a pretty good social, backdrop for these people. And when it's, winter time and they say, I need money because I'm cold, and you go, there's a warming shelter right up there, do you know that? And they're like, hey, but besides that, so it is not an easy answer.
Yeah, it's not. I've got a friend, when we go to a ball game, if he sees somebody in a wheelchair with no legs, or one leg or something, he'll go and put a $20 bill in their pocket. And maybe they're a rich person, but, if they're scamming, it should be on him. But,
if you're going to scam me by having no legs,
yeah.
okay, if that's your way of getting the scam, wow.
Yeah, but I thought maybe, he's wealthy. Anyway, I attended Woodside for a while in Rochester. And when things were really bad a number of years ago, they would have an envelope on a table. And like Chuck would go up and pick an envelope up. Ozzy would go up, pick an envelope up. Peggy would go up, pick an envelope up. And you have somebody's gas bill, water bill, something like that, and you would pay it. And you know how much it is. Maybe Oz got a $20 one, and maybe Chuck got a $200 one. And then they had some way where they would, what do you call it? They vet people, and they would send them to a room, and they would get in, the church would give them a $500 check. And I really appreciated the work that they did. And they would even open up their building for people to sleep in, and feed them. So the Lord talks a lot in scriptures about justice, and that's a major theme here. Does anybody else have anything they want to add?
On a monthly basis, we support the shelter, and then of course we do the volunteering there, and then Schultz Lewis, we sponsor them on a monthly basis. But the one thing, and I read it in the announcements, is the addition to the shelter. Right. That they got like over $1 million grant from the state, which I thought was very very worthwhile. And you saw that structure just north of the shelter now. That's going to be quite a facility.
It's impressive. Yeah, it's impressive. And the number of people afterwards that will come up and say thank you to us.
Garth, I'm sorry.
Jim?
I was just going to say that Scripture tells us to be as gentle as doves, but as wise as serpents. So it's
gentle as a dove and wise as a serpent.
So it's a discerning thing. We have to make that judgment on case-by-case basis.
Yes.
So it's not an easy answer, but that's basically the answer that we've got.
And I'll put this in, then Bob, if someone comes to us and, let's say my baby needs milk or something like that, and we're gonna go to the grocery shop for you, store for you. I've been in situations where the elders would ask, now are you gonna come to church here? And,
Well, it should be stated in such a way that it's an opportunity.
you're welcome.
You're welcome to come and worship with us.
Yeah, but I'm sort of like, we're helping them because they need help.
Right.
Not, no, we're gonna help you come to church here, type thing. There was,
Or something to do that.
pardon me?
We've never done it that
Yeah,
way.
good. There was one guy in Flint that went around the churches, and he came to the Carver Road Church of Christ, and boy, he knew everything about the Church of Christ. And he says, I'm gonna ask you for money, but before I ask you for money, I wanna make sure that you're a true Church of Christ. And he just, he wooed the elders, okay? Now, those elders they were difficult to woo. Two of them all got in a fist fight, literally, in the foyer at the church one day, Sunday. Seriously. And so they give him money, just give him money. Well, they found out that he would go down to the Presbyterian church, and he knew everything about them. And he just made his rounds.
We had a situation like that here a couple years ago.
Yeah. Okay, and then another thing, I'm not going to get through all this. Jerry, let's start the video.
The book of the prophet Amos. Amos was a shepherd and a fig tree farmer who lived right near the border between northern Israel and southern Judah. Now the north had seized its independence about 150 years earlier, remember 1 Kings chapter 12, and it was currently being ruled by Jeroboam II, a successful military leader. He won lots of battles and new territory for Israel, and he generated lots of wealth, but in the eyes of the prophets, he was one of the worst kings ever. His wealth had led to apathy, and he allowed idol worship for the gods of Canaan, which in turn led to injustice and the neglect of the poor. And it got to a point where Amos couldn't take it anymore. He sensed God calling him to go trek up north to Bethel, an important city that had a large temple, and start announcing God's word to the people. And this book is a collection of his sermons and poems and visions uttered over the years. They were compiled later to give God's people a sense of his divine message to the northern kingdom. And it's a message we still need to hear today. The book has a fairly clear design. Chapters 1 and 2 are a series of messages to the nations and Israel. And chapters 3 to 6 are a collection of poems that express Amos' message to the people of Israel and its leaders. Chapters 7 through 9 contain a series of visions that Amos experienced that depict God's coming judgment on Israel. Let's just dive in. So the book opens with a series of short poems that accuse all of Israel's neighbors of violence and injustice. And this is kind of odd because the book's opening line said that Amos was going to speak against Israel. But watch how this works. As Amos is naming all of these neighboring nations, you can go look at a map and see that he's creating a circle. And when he's done, Israel lies right in the center, like a target in crosshairs. And on Israel, Amos unleashes a poetic accusation that's 3 times longer and more intense than any of these others. He accuses Israel's wealthy of ignoring the poor and allowing grave injustice in their land. Specifically, by allowing the poor to be sold into debt slavery, and then going on to deny any of these people legal representation. And this, Amos asks, is this the family that was once denied justice and enslaved in Egypt? A family that God rescued from oppression and slavery? The party's over, Amos says. God is done putting up with you. And so the opening of the next section explains why. God says, I chose you, Israel, from among all the families of the earth. This is an allusion to Genesis 12, how God called the family of Abraham to become God's blessing to all of the nations. And so then God says, so this is why I will punish you for all of your sin. Israel had a great calling, which came with great responsibility. so their sin and rebellion brings great consequences. And this section brings together a lot of Amos's poems, and you'll see a few key themes repeated over and over. So first, he's constantly exposing the religious hypocrisy of Israel's wealthy and their leaders. And he describes how they faithfully attend their religious gatherings, giving offerings and sacrifices, all the while neglecting the poor and ignoring injustice. And Amos says it's all a sham, that God actually hates their worship because it's totally disconnected from how they treat people. God says a real relationship with him will transform a person's relationships. And so Amos' call to true worship is to let justice flow like a river and righteousness like a never-failing stream. Now these two words, they're super important for Amos and actually all of the prophets. So righteousness, or in Hebrew, tzedakah, refers to a standard of right, equitable relationships between people, no matter their social differences. And justice, or in Hebrew, mishpat, refers to concrete actions that you take to correct injustice and create righteousness. And so both of these are to permeate the life of God's covenant people like a rushing stream fills a dry riverbed. The next thing is Amos' repeated accusations of Israel's idolatry. So remember, the northern kingdom broke away from southern Judah. Their king built 2 new temples to rival Solomon's in Jerusalem. And he placed a golden calf in each. Remember 1 Kings chapter 12. Since then, Israel had only accumulated more idols, worshiping the gods of sex and weather and war. And in the prophet's view, the worship of these gods always led to injustice, because these gods don't require the same degree of justice and righteousness as the God of Israel, not to mention that these gods were immoral themselves. Not the God of Israel, he's different. So he said in one place, "Seek me that you may live." And then right after that, say to Israel, "Seek good, not evil, that you may live." So true worship of the Creator God of Israel is synonymous with doing good, with generosity, and with justice. And so the final theme in these chapters is that because Israel and its king have rejected Amos and the other prophets, God will send the day of the Lord. This is a great and terrible act of justice on Israel. Specifically, Amos predicts that a powerful nation will come and conquer and decimate their cities and take the people away into exile. And we know his prediction came true. Some 40 years later, the Assyrian Empire swooped in and did exactly as Amos had said. The book closes with a series of visions that Amos experienced, and they're symbolic depictions of the coming day of the Lord. So he sees Israel devastated by a locust swarm, and then by a scorching fire, and then they're being swallowed up like overripe fruit. And in the final vision, Amos sees God violently striking the pillars of Israel's great idol temple at Bethel, and the whole building comes crumbling down. It's an image of God's justice on the leaders and the gods of Israel. Their end has finally come. But then, all of a sudden, in the final paragraph, we see a glimmer of hope. It picks up this image of Israel as a destroyed building, and God says that out of the ruins, he will one day restore the house of David. In other words, he's going to bring the future Messianic king from David's line, and he will rebuild the family of God's people, which, surprisingly, we're told, is going to include people from all of the nations. All of the devastation caused by Israel's sin and God's judgment will that day be reversed. Now this final paragraph is super important. It's the only sign of hope on the other side of judgment. And it helps us see how this book is exploring the relationship between God's justice and his mercy. If God is good, he has to confront and judge evil among Israel and the nations. But his long-term purposes are to restore his world and build a new covenant family. And so through Amos' words, we still today hear his call to learn from Israel's hypocrisy and disaster and to embrace a true worship of this God, which should always lead to justice and righteousness and loving our neighbor. And that's what the book of Amos is all about.
I think that can really preach today in our country, I really do. Okay, is there anything in that video that just hit you, that you resonated with? Anything? Yes, Mama.
It sounds like today.
Sounds like today, yeah. Yeah. And, some sometimes you think, boy, things can't get worse. Can they get worse?
Yes.
My grandma used to listen to a song, cheer up, things could be worse, cheer up, it does no good to curse. They say how to cheer up, that things could get much worse, so I cheered up. Sure enough, things got worse. Yeah, but, and so, but yes, I agree with you there. Anything else that resonated with you? What about in the civil rights movement? What in there resonated with you about the civil rights movement? Can you hear Martin Luther King saying? Anybody? Justice like a river, you know. Yeah, you really, and that part they shared, that they talked about there, I mean, you know, that really resonated with me because of, you know, the civil rights movement and you know, the things that I talked to Dr. Knight the other day, and he, for his birthday or something, Dr. Knight had taken him to see the two Dr. Knights, okay? One was Dr. Knight. He had two doctorates, and his wife was one doctor, so she was just Dr. Knight. And that, let me just pause for you to tell you a real funny story about college students. Dr. Knight, the lady, was in the restroom, and she was in a stall, and we were always closed, and a student knocks on the door. Dr. Knight, are you busy? True story. But anyway, yeah, well, college students. Yeah. But, she took him on the civil rights tour. But after Montgomery, he said, I gotta go home. When he saw just how horrible they were treated. The African American person, how horrible they were treated down in the South, especially. And Prentice Meadow said when national TV showed him with the fire hoses on the blacks and the dogs, he said they won. And but anyway, that's a powerful scripture. Again, I think the second major theme is their hypocrisy in their worship. You know, God rejected Israel's religious festivals and sacrifices because they really didn't translate in the ethical treatment of their neighbor. I mean, they were going through all this, but they were abusing their neighbors. And then I think there is divine accountability. Amos emphasizes that God's chosen people come with a high responsibility. Because Israel rebelled, they were going to face severe consequences. Hello, Johnny. Good to see you. I mean, Israel's going to face severe consequences. In the Bible, who does it say among us have a greater responsibility?
Hey, how you doing? Teachers,
elders, yeah. We have a...
Basically, the leadership, anybody that has a leading.
Yeah, I believe so. Yes, Bob.
A comment I was going to make earlier, just to make sure I made it, I guess, is that we're talking about justice and about whether the panhandlers gets money, etc. An ethos I have that I've picked up from studying the Bible that I guess I pass on to everyone is the story of Lazarus and the rich man. That parable is interesting if you look at that.
Okay, I'm sorry. Talk a little louder and a little slower. I'm deaf.
The parable of Lazarus and the rich man
Yes.
is an interesting parable because there he knows the poor man, right? The poor, he knows him. And it seems to be part of what that parable is saying is that that person was right by you all the time. And you didn't do anything. In fact, you just walked by and you had callous disregard for that person. And that affects me. If there's somebody, and I don't know that the Lord puts him in my life, but if it happens to be we're sharing the same space and we're near each other, I feel particularly that God's like, okay, you know the Bible, you know what I've said. Here is a poor person, here is a hungry person, here's somebody that needs something, and you have it, Bob. What are you going to do? And I don't know whether everybody else feels that way. We all have to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling. But I feel like, okay, Lord, I'm really busy right now, but that person clearly is in need. I need to make sure I address that need because you would want me to do that, Lord.
I couldn't agree more with you. Remember a sermon 2 or 3 weeks ago that we talked about, would you recognize Jesus? I don't know how you feel about angels. I really believe there are angels on earth. Now I can say that and you can fire me because I only have about 8 more weeks with you. and we had a study on angels here.
Yes, we did.
Did you come to the conclusion that maybe there are angels on earth or not?
Sure.
Yeah. And I always wonder, what if this was one of God's, But yeah, I think you're exactly right.
And back to that parable, it doesn't say that the poor man was an angel. He was just somebody that was there. And the rich man says, oh, hey, there's so-and-so. All right, there's the guy I know.
Yeah.
There's Lazarus. And, hey, could he help me? So, that if we have at least that ethic, hopefully it'll be different to the community and other people, right? Look, you're taking care of somebody that's there in your charge.
All right, we didn't really get to the end, but I think I appreciate your feedback. And again, I always try to make things applicable for us in the 20th century today. And I think God today feels the same way about us, and the poor, the people who are without, as he did back in those days. Okay? All right, next week is Obadiah. I think I forgot to send you the video on Amos this week, didn't I? So I will try to get that one out to Obadiah that you can look at and maybe do some research. And it'll be sort of a Sunday school lesson on Saturday night. When I was a kid, I always had to prepare my, go over my Sunday school lesson to answer questions the next day. All right, time's up. And